Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today we are heading back for another dose of the International Fire Instructors Workshop. This was my trip out to Australia. Privileged to be surrounded by some incredible fire behavior experts from all over the world, and privileged to be invited into some incredible facilities. And today you're going to hear from James Mendoza, who's from San Jose Fire Department. James is a captain and training officer, and he's honestly one of the nicest blokes you're probably ever going to have the privilege of meeting, and that really comes across in his talk today. He's one of those rare people who can really translate fire behavior science into operational decision-making without really turning it into a lecture. He's funny, he's relatable, just an incredibly charismatic guy, and he's also very qualified. He holds a MA in education and a BS in microbiology and immunology from Stanford University. He's been a technical panel member for UL's Coordinated Fire Attack Study and the master instructor for the From Knowledge to Practice project in Ottawa. He also helped rewrite the State of California Structural Firefighting course, and before the fire service, he was a science teacher, which really comes across as to why he's such an incredible communicator. And he really shows the very best way that this can be done, because he builds fire behavior and curriculum and live training in a way that uses science theory and models us as then competent firefighters in a way that doesn't make it super complex. He takes these complex ideas and makes them understandable. So the context of his presentation, which again is free to download. If you look below this, you can follow along with James or download it later and talk through with your crews. You're going to hear about an episode that is grounded in a debrief from a major large volume compartment fire at Home Depot in San Jose. So this is a bit like the B&Q warehouses and stuff, those large industrial units that you see here in the UK, or a big screw fix or something like this. And this Home Depot fire in San Jose was back in 2022. So it's a massive, huge footprint, high ceilings, high rack storage, loads of things like compressed gas cylinders, aerosols, lithium-ion batteries, type of environment you would expect in these kind of outlet stores. And the environment that very quickly becomes hostile to just standard water application. James takes us into gas cooling in large volume cells, which we did a little bit of conversation around when we were out there, and talks about what it actually should look like when the smoke layer is literally down at head height. I really do suggest you go and download this presentation because there's some great footage in there as well about the crews deploying. And it's like, well, it's very arousing to look at. It's very, you'd have loved to have been there, but also incredibly hostile. He explains the limitations of straight stream ceiling wall in these mega large spaces, in these large volume cells, and why direct gas cooling with fog can become the only viable way to control real radiant heat flux long enough to perhaps search and survive these environments. Also, when you look at some of the videos, have a think about the ventilation profile of these buildings and the size of the opening when you see the speed at which that flow path is moving. When you see that moving, it gives you a good understanding of how quickly the gains you could make from different methods of water application can quickly disappear as fresh, hot, really turbulent gases replace the thing you just cooled. You'll also hear the reality around command decisions and resource escalation. So it gives you some insight into what they're doing over there in San Jose. You hear the pull between defensive indicators and the need to make an entry for life risk, and the uncomfortable training truth that firefighters can be excellent at house fires, but still feel completely out of their depth, maybe even underprepared for these large volume warehouse retail box style fires. There's learning in here about embers that get cast into neighboring homes, all the things that you would need to think about running a major incident in what James refers to as a lean staffed system, which I think we could probably relate to in most UK fire and rescue services. And even how one fire changed their approach to environmental impact from runoff, from water and treatment of chemicals. Once again, this was recorded live at the International Fire Instructors Workshop in Australia. So there's some real background noise. We've cleaned it up a little bit, but you feel the energy of the room. It's part of the value of it. It's raw, it's honest. We've left it in there. And this is all part of this mini-series that has been supported by EnduroProtect and DWIPE. The absolute best collaboration. If we're going to keep pushing competence through realistic fire behavior training, we have to be just as disciplined about reducing the invisible risks that come with exposure. EnduroProtect's particulate blocking range and DWIPE's decontamination wipes are essential practical tools that work well together, and you will find the links for those in the episode notes below. So if you're serious about training, make sure you have got the tools to do it. This is James Mendoza at the International Fire Instructors Workshop. I'll see you on the other side.
So I'm the guy that doesn't belong in the fire service. I don't have a PhD, unlike the other two presenters. I entered the fire service on a dare. My sister dared me to do something not nerdy. And I asked her what an activity would be that's not nerdy, because I was going to take calculus and physics in high school, and we were all waiting to do that. Who's with me? And she said, become a volunteer firefighter, essentially. And I was like, why would a nerd like me want to become a volunteer firefighter? And she said, because girls like firefighters. And if there's one thing that a nerdy kid wants more than a math book for Christmas, it is a social life. So that's kind of how I found my way into the fire service. And then more recently, my sister has told me, how did you find the nerdy in the fire service? I guess, how did you do that? Today we're here to talk about, did you actually want me to talk about?
I like whatever you say.
So maybe we'll talk about my journey towards the end. So we're here to talk about gas cooling in a large volume compartment. This is a fire that we had in the city of San Jose back in 2022. This was in formerly our first due area, but we had new stations built, so it was actually not my first due area, but we still felt it was our first due area.
It was 30 minutes earlier.
Yeah. We were in this Home Depot store trying to get keys made about 30 minutes prior to this fire breaking out. It's a little bit suspicious. They said that the machine that copies keys was not working. And then they said that the origin of the fire started around that machine. Those are totally jokes, because I have to be careful what I say about this fire. There's pending litigation in court cases. So if you ask me questions and I look at you like, yeah, I can't answer that, there's some things I can't talk about. So this is my fire engine right here. You can see that there's a very large plume and embers that are being cast upon the neighborhood just behind this Home Depot, which created interesting issues in and of itself. I think you guys are very familiar with wildfire, or you call them bushfires. So a fire engine, a company went behind there to try to get around to the other side of the Home Depot, because traffic was just a nightmare on the main drive. And they just described it as like wind-driven, wild and urban interface conditions, as that neighborhood was starting to catch fire from the ember cast from Home Depot. And so that captain made a very hard decision. He veered from his assignment, took independent action, and was pretty much, he and his crew responsible for saving about half dozen homes that backed up to this facility. I'm vaguely aware of bushfires from my stint here in Australia prior, where we were taking a course with John, and then there was a large bushfire, and they responded. John had myself and another American, and he asked if he could take us with him to the fire. And the powers that be said, yeah, go ahead, suit him up and take it with you. So he put me in company station officer, wildland garb. Yes, am I saying that right? And John takes us to this area where a fire is rolling up on this neighborhood. There's a whole bunch of your rural fire service, right? Who's got apparatus or appliances. Sorry, I don't speak Australian. Appliances set up, and the fire's rolling up. He drops us off. He's like, I got to hook up with the commander, and I'll come back to pick you guys up. Please don't die. And so we start walking to look at the fire, and whoever was in charge looked at me like I was the best thing since Christmas, because I had company officer gear. Yeah. So he came up to me, gave me a full debrief. Oh, we got this over here and this over here. Well, fire's coming up this way. I got what's blah, 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 blah. Ready to pass command. Right? And I just looked at him and I said, dude, I'm from California. You're still in command, but it looks great. You guys are going to be okay. Can you take a picture of us? flames are rolling and eucalyptus are exploding, and it was just the best day ever. Okay. All right, so gas cooling in a large compartment. Let's get back. All right. This is the views actually from one of Ed's tactical games, I believe, where he did a breakdown of this incident. You can see kind of the scale of this large mega-sized building, and it's a very irregular shape. It sets up against some other buildings. It's about 455 feet by about 283 feet deep. That's about 140 meters by about 86 meters, or about 12,000 square meters. And I am told that there's this thing called a rugby pitch. See, I have no idea what that is, but it's about 8,400 square meters. So the size of this mega is pretty substantial. I don't know if do you guys have Home Depots out here? Okay. So what is a Home Depot? They're basically home repair stores. They are in warehouses, large volume spaces, very high ceilings, about 30-foot ceilings. And the walls, right, in these large commercial warehouses are very far apart, okay? Which becomes a question in firefighting, okay? At least how we apply water in the States. Some other considerations, high pile storage, high rack storage, right? You have just a huge fuel load. And as you look at the surfaces of the available fuels, right, the surfaces are found when you're in the aisle, not from facing the aisle, okay? So our approach to this fire problem is going to be staring down the aisles, which means it's very difficult to put water on burning surfaces because you don't have access to those surfaces unless you enter the aisles, okay? What happens to steel when it heats up? Well, we all know from building construction, right, that steel expands, and that can cause catastrophic failure of structural members, right? Well, what's holding up all this fuel? Steel members, right, which are being heated, right? So there's significant structural collapse and entrapment hazard to firefighters working in this location, right? Tons of compressed gas cylinders. Think of how many aerosolized cans are in a Home Depot. And then put a large fire on that. It sounded like a war zone inside this facility. The explosions and the shrapnel, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Not gonna lie, it's amazing. Just a little bit disconcerting. We'd recently had in California and Los Angeles a fire at Boyd Street where there were compressed gas cylinders, and we saw a presentation on that. And there were metal shrapnel pieces in the scalps of the firefighters as they were exiting from that, right? So that was kind of fresh in my mind as I was listening to the blevys and the explosions and everything else. Lithium ion batteries, you'll see it in some interior footage, just, they're trying to sell them, right? So there's just this banks of them that are igniting from the radiant heat flux. It's just phenomenal. Typically, these buildings have a sprinkler system, okay? We have an interesting issue in our organization about who is tasked with the sprinkler system pumping, and in this particular case, you'll hear no one gets assigned that task, okay?
We're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing: blue light services do better together than apart. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. I'll see you there.
Yeah, there was a comment as to, what was the status of that sprinkler system, and I'm not allowed to comment on the status of it. So I really apologize. All right, so large box fire comes in at just almost dinner time. Okay, like I said, we were at Home Depot trying to get keys made. We caught an EMS call across the street. Dispatch said, hey, we're looking at you guys on the map. There's a medical call. Can you grab it? We said, sure. So we went across the street to a movie theater, handled an EMS call. We drove back to our station, and as we were pulling into the backyard, the dispatch comes out, and you'll hear the dispatch. We kind of all look at each other in the apparatus and the appliance, and we're like, no way, we were just there. It can't be on fire. This is BS. We're going to be late for dinner, right? And then we respond. While we're en route, I start reading the notes on the computer, and it's like people are screaming in the background. There are tiles falling on fire from the ceiling. Right, and so as I'm reading the notes, I'm like, hey guys, I think we're going to an actual fire. Right, this sounds legit, okay? We ended up partnering the aftermath of this fire with our Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, a federal government entity tasked with arson investigation in part. They're exceedingly helpful and useful, and our arson investigation team really enjoyed the process of working them and the ability to access the resources that they can bring to assist in this investigation. Amazingly, there were no significant injuries and no fatalities. I thought for sure we would find a fatality, if not several, in the aftermath, but there were none. So you can kind of think about commercial buildings in the middle of the day on a weekend. These are packed with people doing weekend projects on their homes. These people are awake, right, mobile. So when there is an issue, they can leave the occupancy. But these stores are large and the restrooms are in the back. We know from other large fires in the United States and occupancies that people have been trapped because they were in a rear portion of a large-scale building when the fire broke out, and then they were trapped there. So one of the things on my mind, I've thought about this a lot as I walk through Home Depots. I'm not quite ed level, but I have thought, what if there's a fire in here and there's people in the restrooms? And trying to get to the rear of this building to search the restrooms was on my mind. It was part of my thought process and totally wasn't going to happen. In the end, no injuries, no fatalities. And you know what? The fire went out. This is a screenshot from my computer. You can see all of the units. This went to 5 alarms, which drains a lot of resources from our city. We run I don't know if you've heard of the industry standard called lean. So we're a lean organization. We staff about 20% compared to other comparable cities. So we have a city that I live in. It's about 75,000 residents. It has 5 fire stations, 5 engines, a truck, a rescue, a chief. And we have an equivalent portion of our city that has 1 engine covering that geographic area and population. So lean. We endangered this neighborhood here, Lisa Drive, with the Ember cast. The amount of water we flowed was rather large, and the debris field clogged the drains, so we had several feet of water in the aftermath. Turns out one of the things that we learned from this experience was our water treatment in the city creates water with chemicals which make it okay to drink, but environmentally have a huge negative impact. And so this particular fire actually changed how we are able to flow water at emergency events and what we have to do in the aftermath to mitigate our impact on the environment. So a very long-lasting impact from this fire. This store has not reopened, just by the way, but there is a second Home Depot in the area not too far away. The not opening is a huge economic impact to the store and civilians, and a little bit to the firefighters as well. It's not as bad, though, as a convenience store that makes Slurpees closing down, So I have had that experience where I lost a Slurpee making convenience store for several years. It was a tragedy. I am planning to take your Slurpee machines when I leave. It's been amazing. All right, these are early arrival conditions. Not sure how to get this. Let's see if I can. So you can see fire in the back. This is on the Alpha Bravo side of the building, and you can see there's a good fire rolling down this aisle. An arrest was made a week after this fire. In the allegations from the district attorney, as I say, it's working its way through the court system. The allegation is that the arrested party lit multiple fires in this store to create a distraction so that they could load a shopping cart full of tools and leave the premises without paying for them. All right, so multiple locations with this fire starting. Just a few minutes later, this is the door on the Alpha side of the building at the Bravo corner. So your sector 1-2 corner, is that what you guys would say? Alpha Bravo, okay. So just a little while later, you can see the progress. So smoke coming out at this about 6-foot level. And that's a pretty beautiful bilayer, isn't it? It's beautiful, look at that. It just doesn't get any better than that, yeah. Okay. So we launched in response to a structure fire, a full first. We do not have a specific protocol in our city for large commercial buildings other than high-rise. So this gets a response that you would get to a single-family residence, which is 3 engines, 2 trucks, 2 chiefs, and ambulance-type unit. So a total of about 25 people. This is the number of people we have determined are necessary for an on-fire residence with no rescue. Okay? So this is what comes here. You can hear the dispatch. Does this have sound?
I imagine it does.
It's okay. We don't have to listen to the dispatch, but sorry, I thought we would.
Engine 12, engine 13, truck 13, battalion 13.
I'll have you stop it in a second.
Engine 17, engine 17, truck 35, rescue medic 26, battalion 1, med 30, full first for 8 structure fire. The command channel is command 21. All people, 9 Plate Blossom Hill Road, near Hillview Avenue and Whitfield Boulevard. Station area.
So this is where like, yeah, it's not a real fire.
8. The command channel is command 21.
17 command.
17 and a half.
That is public 21.
Engine 12 and a half.
Command 21, engine 17 and a half. 920 Plaza Hill Road. Large commercial structure, single story, Home Depot. We have a warranty fire. Looking like it's in the upper side of the structure. We're going to be setting up the command, dropping it just down, preparing to do internal fire attack. People been a little farther away. And let's go ahead and run this on Mac 37. The team will be 5 weeks.
Engine 17, copy, you're on scene of a large commercial structure, single story. It's the working fire on the upper side of the structure. You're dropping 2.5. Preparing for external fire attack and attack 30 for tactical.
Command 21 to Tag 13.
Battalion 13.
Tag 37 for tactical. And give me a second alarm. You'll be lost in the middle at Wakefield from time here.
Battalion 13 stands for attack 37 for tactical. Started back in alarm staging, Plaza Hill, Acton Field.
Additional for Tag 13. PD code 3 for traffic control on Plaza.
Battalion 13 stands for PD code 3 traffic control on the road.
Command 21, that's just off right on.
It's just also arriving on street.
12-1, I've been right there. 12 copy, we got the 9 right here.
You want engine 13 and not see with engine 11.
Engine 13 on scene.
13, second line go up.
13 copy, dropping second line and throughout.
Third truck is here. Have my engine crew on fire. Second truck, top side. Give me a vent hole.
2 ready for command 21.
Copy.
All right, so you can see the first initial IC gives a size up working fire and proceeds to dispatch the units out exactly the same way we would do for a house fire. Okay, it's pretty common for us. First arriving company, first attack line, second arriving company, water supply. Typically they will do 2 out, and then third engine does a secondary line, which usually supports that first attack line. And then we have 2 trucks. Usually one goes to the roof to cut a hole. We can have that conversation later. And then one typically goes interior. So we sometimes say outside truck, inside truck. And then typically the ambulance units, when they get there, will deal with EMS victims or be attached to a truck. You hear the battalion chief, our most senior battalion chief at the time. He's responding from the station I am, also with the truck company. He intercedes, right? After the initial size up, he says, let's upgrade this to a second. It's fantastic that the battalion chief, right, noticed that discrepancy, has the descriptor of the building, knows Home Depots are large volume, and upgrades to a second alarm right away. This is this main street that the store is on is one of the busiest intersections in our city of 1 million people. So the car traffic and everything was crazy. So responding to the police. We were actually second on scene. Engine 17 was on the air. So they were really fast to the fire. We thought for sure we would get there before they were, but they rolled in quick. I was training a new driver who was trying to come in through the main street, through the parking area, and people are just exiting the parking lot in their cars trying to get away from the fire. So I was helping him navigate and avoid having an accident in the parking lot when Engine 12 went on scene, and they were at the hydrant that I was going to lay out to, and they ended up laying into the pumping engine. And you could have, heard my face smile over the radio, because that meant I didn't have to do water supply. I got to go interior, right? So it's like, yeah, we'll be a backup line for you, no problem. The truck from my station, they came to assist Engine 17. So these are just kind of the summations. You'll notice we didn't say we're in the offensive strategy, but he said that they're going interior, so that was sort of implied. And then, of course, no resources. This wasn't upgraded, right, in the initial report, but then the chief did. Okay.
I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
So Engine 12 at the nearest hydrant. Engine 17 parked here. We came down this aisle to assist. So my plan was to wrap the supply hose and drive out to this hydrant. Instead, 12 was able to wrap and pull in. Okay. First arriving truck positioned here in case it was going to go defensive. And when we rounded the corner and saw the fire plume, it was going to go defensive. Okay. It was like a plume going to the moon. And then the question was, Blue Card spends a lot of time training you to recognize what are defensive fire conditions. And I would say that this qualified as defensive fire conditions. But there were so many people in the parking lot, and we had just been in there, and it was very busy, that we had to do some kind of search, right? Make some kind of entrance into the building, if for no other reason than to check for life. That's at least what my mindset was. We have to go in and just see if there's anyone who needs assistance coming out. Once again, those bathrooms in the back, it's a large facility, what is going to happen there? Okay. This is kind of what it looked like when I arrived. How big a fire do you need to put smoke down to the ground of a large volume, 30-foot high ceiling building so it's down at the ground as you enter? Does it take a rocket scientist, because I'm not one, I'm not Carol, not one of my 7 degrees, to know that this is a big fire and that this is like real deal, yeah? So how do you go into a fire environment and protect yourself so that you don't get killed in a flashover? Because this is what's going through my mind, right? And so this is basically how I conceive of compartment fires. Yeah? You can control the airflow, you can control the heat release rate, or you control the radiant heat flux coming down onto you. Yeah? Okay. Organizationally, my organization does not control airflow. We do not use door curtains. We don't close the door partially. We allow the full airflow through a pedestrian door. So I know at any compartment fire, I have 4.2 megawatts worth of airflow coming into my compartment. So if I have enough fuel to generate heat, it's going to create a hot gas layer. That hot gas layer is going to radiate heat flux to the ground. And so I either have to take the teeth out of the fire from a distance, or I have to control the radiant heat flux coming down on me. Okay, that's kind of my options. We do this utilizing our 45 mil hose at 150 gallons a minute, about 570 liters per minute, applied in a straight stream. And we do what I call rainbows, but the more macho people call, inverted U's or an end pattern or wall ceiling wall, but I think it's a rainbow. It looks to me like a rainbow. And this is what our recruits are taught in the academy. So for 20 weeks, they do rainbows at 150 GPM wall ceiling wall. And then for 3 days, I get them and I show them how to use a fog at lower flow rates and larger patterns. Okay. How does this work to cool the hot gas layer and stop the radiant heat flux to the ground? Well, I feel like no one really knows. Okay, but there are some reasonable thought processes that we can go through, which is when you strike a wall, go backwards, with a straight stream at high pressure, that water shatters against the wall and ceiling and creates small droplets in that really wonderful, right, 0.3 millimeter range, 350 micrometers, right? You guys don't get excited when you hear those numbers? I thought I was in Australia. So we wet a surface. That makes a cold and wet contact point for hot gases. We wet a ceiling. It makes a cold and wet contact for hot gases and another wall. And we create small misty water droplets that rain through this smoke layer. How much of that cooling is due to the falling of small misty water droplets versus the contact of the hot gases with the surface area? I don't know. But in a small hallway, there's a lot of cold, wet stuff for hot stuff to come into contact with and become cooler, yeah? When we change this, I'm going the wrong way, to a large volume where the walls are very far apart, then there's gas right next to the wall that's in contact with a wet surface, and there's a little bit of mist a foot or two off the wall, but there's all of this volume of hot gas in the center that is not being cooled by that straight stream technique. And so riddle me this, Batman. How large a volume does it take where utilizing wet walls and byproduct mist stops being effective at cooling the hot gas layer? The answer is, I don't know. I have no idea. I know at some point it will cease working just based on this premise. I figured Home Depot was a large enough volume that this wasn't going to work. Does that seem reasonable? How much of the hot gas is going to be in contact with the wall and ceiling when this hot smoke layer is down to the floor? A very small percentage in the store designed like this. So what is the answer to cooling and controlling that hot gas layer so we don't get pushed out or burned over in a flashover? And you guys know the answer to this, yeah? It's putting your nozzle on fog and doing direct cooling of the gases. Yeah? Okay. So this is what I teach my recruits for 3 days of their training and what I try to teach my crews to do. But where did I learn this? Well, I started my journey actually by reaching out to Ed, because I thought after my first experience on the nozzle that I didn't know what I was doing. And so I began doing what any nerd would do who doesn't know what they're doing, began reading books, and I ran across 3D firefighting, and there was one American author, so I reached out to Ed. Shot Ed an email with some questions. He answered me back. I shot him more questions. He answered me back. I shot him more questions. He answered me back saying, "You seem to have a lot of questions. Why don't you come up and do some training with us?" I said, "Shh," in a heartbeat. So I drove up to Grisham, Oregon. Ed's teaching class in Grisham, Oregon. He's saying, when I was in Sweden, I learned this. When I was in Sweden, I learned this. When I was in Sweden, I learned this. I thought, what the hell am I doing in Grisham, Oregon? Where should I be? Sweden. So here I am in Sweden. That's the funny looking turnouts. That takes you just so far, right? So there's more correspondence between the authors of the 3D book. I meet John over the internet, and John very kindly invites me to Australia. A man I've never met before. I didn't even know what John looked like, other than he had the picture in the book. But you know how those pictures are, right?
It was better in person, wasn't it?
So came to Australia, and John took us to the large volume cell. Now, how big is Home Depot compared to that large volume cell? So will it work? I didn't know. But I felt like straight stream wasn't going to work. So I have a decision to make, right? When you're faced with not knowing if you can actually keep safe, you're going to pull every thought out of your brain that you have if you have put thoughts in your brain. Otherwise, if you just have one thought, right, that's the thing you're going to do. Okay? Where did my crew learn to gas cool? Well, like I said, I get recruits for 3 days. I think it's important for them to be educated. I teach them an alternate way to use the tool that they have, and I get them for a very short amount of time. Okay? But I wrap my crew into live fire instruction. So I have one of my crew members here, Marcos Cruz. He's been burning with me for a long time now. So very familiar with the techniques that we use, very familiar with live fire conditions. Okay. And so we get our assignment to go interior. There were 3 entrances to this store. Engine 17 was going to go in the Alpha Delta one. We went down the middle, and engine 12 ended up going towards the outside. So you can see this is where we saw the initial video, the smoke layer coming out. Engine 12, crew thought it was unsafe defensive conditions. They never crusted the interior of the building. They applied water from the outside. Engine 17 took a 2.5, and they asked for truck 13 to help move because a 65 mil? A 70 is really hard to move, right? So 2 companies, and then we went through this entrance with my company to back up. You can see the smoke conditions here as we enter. This is a firefighter on probation, just out of the academy, 20 weeks of wall sealing wall, 3 days of fog on a 2.5. So this is helmet cam from that firefighter. Good, I turned the sound off because it's good. No, there would be like a flashy soundtrack. So you can see he's flowing water to set correct pressure. So letting his engineer dial up the correct pressure to get probably 250 gallons a minute out of this line. And he starts applying water in straight stream fashion. You can see the amount of air being pulled in. Think of all the megawattage that that's going to create. And if you're pulling in that amount of air, there must be an outlet somewhere. Well, this is going to stoke a really large heat release rate. He's doing a little bit of water application a little higher. He has the 2.5 pin to the ground because it's a lot of nozzle reaction, so he's limited in his ability to apply water because he's using his body weight to secure that to the ground. But he's applying water just like he was trained for 20 weeks. This is the son of an existing San Jose firefighter. You can see the red glow as you look down the aisle. There was fire just rolling between the aisles as all of the contents were pyrolyzing and igniting. You can see it's very difficult because of the shape of the aisles to get any of that water on the burning surfaces because the edge of the aisle essentially blocks it. And he cannot get enough of an angle to actually wet much of the burning surface contents down the aisle. You can see the smoke layer lighting off, right? That's not a good sign, right? It's not a good sign. He's just trying, right? Flowing as much water as he can, trying to place that water onto burning surfaces. Those are batteries igniting, lithium-ion batteries for small handheld tools. That was a display. I know that because I was there earlier that day. And then this is him coming out. Now, that's the firefighter from engine 17. Truck 13 went to help them with the 2.5. So this firefighter also carries a helmet cam. I do not carry a helmet cam. And so they're coming in behind that 2.5. So you see just a slightly different view. As we made entry to support engine 17 and we started to see the gas layer, I was looking at it with the thermal imaging camera, and my thermal imaging camera above engine 17's line was all yellow. And that's not a good thing because then it goes red, and when it goes red, that's fire, right? So it's a quite large temperature range, right, through the yellows, but I have no idea where in the yellows that is. So I told my crew before we entered that we were going to do gas cooling like Europeans. And when I said we were going to enter, they were kind of like, we're going to do what? And so as we enter behind 17, but off to the side, the other entrance, we start gas cooling above them. And I can see in the thermal imaging that we drop the color from yellow to gray. And then we start cooling all around us because the same thing is happening throughout the volume. The smoke layer in the tick is yellow, and I need it to be gray to control my environment. So you can kind of see to the left, you can see my line spraying. We've actually passed engine 17, who didn't make forward progress, because after we cooled for a while, I was like, we can't just sit here static, we need to push forward. And I didn't realize engine 17 had kind of stopped where they were near the entrance. We pushed forward just past the checkout stand so that we could look down the aisles with the thermal imaging camera for victims. And we were only in there a few minutes before the IC very rightly determined these were defensive conditions and that we should vacate.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes.
You can see just how clear it is at the bottom because air is rushing in with tremendous velocity. It's going up the pant leg of my firefighter. That's what he remembers most, is the air shooting up his pants as he was on the ground applying water. Now, everyone on my crew was asked to turn to a tactical channel So again, you can just see the smoke layer needing to be cooled as it's starting to light off. And you can't hear the explosions or the war sound, but it is just explosion after explosion after explosion. So there's myself and my 3 crew members. They're on a tactical channel, which is line of sight. I'm monitoring 2 radios while supervising them and using the thermal image camera. And the vacate, vacate, vacate order is going to come across just one, the command channel, which no one in my crew is on except for me, the person who is highly task saturated, listening for the get out. So it's a large flow rate, but it is nothing compared to the large heat release rate. It's very hard for us to actually get that water on the burning surfaces. And so we're not making forward progress. And so at some point, right, the battalion chief says, hey, you guys, it's not looking better from out here, it's looking worse. And now we're starting to back out. And now it becomes a surround and drown, order food. Because we're going to be here all night long. And we were. Well, crews were. I was able to actually get cut free from this incident because they were concerned about the neighborhood next door or behind. And so they asked us if we could pack up to redeploy to that neighborhood. But by the time we had packed up, that neighborhood had adequate resources. And so then they actually cut me free to run emergency calls in the city, and we ran emergency calls. You really have to think about a bunch of things if you're in charge of a crew, right? When I told them we were going interior and they looked at me like I was crazy, you have to understand that you should listen to that. Now, we still went interior, but it makes you stop and pause and think, like, why do they think I'm crazy? And I don't know if you grew up seeing video footage of 9/11. So I became a firefighter just before 9/11. But I remember looking at the firefighters' faces in the lobbies of the towers and seeing the fear on their face. I was like, that's not normal, right? And so it's kind of reminded me of that. They say risk, you should give risk a name, right? I knew when I was going interior that I was risking the lives of my crew. And I didn't have Marcos with me for this fire, but I had McClellan, who had a son. Sorry, I think it's just how my PTSD comes out once in a while. Had Wolzinski, who had 2 daughters. So, you know, I knew Kai, I knew Cora. We'd met Mason on a strike team. So I knew their kids, and I thought about their kids. Don't tell my wife. I had a daughter at this point in time. I did not think about my daughter. I thought about my crew and their family and what I was risking for them. But I got to be honest, I think I'm immortal. I wasn't afraid for me. And maybe that's a bad quality in a company officer. Like, you decide. I think about that a lot, okay? So I told them we were staying together, no one splits up. When we went interior, we had pushed to the aisle, and I really wanted to grab Wolzinski and do a quick search, but I had told the crew we were staying together, and I couldn't break that. Okay, so we knew the deal. We were going in gas cooling. We were sticking together, and we were staying together. And I followed that, even though I had other thoughts. The thermal imaging camera, I wish it had a recorder. I wish we had a helmet cam, but we didn't. So, you know, that footage was from the other firefighters. It was amazing. I really felt that we got very effective cooling of that large volume by applying gas cooling. It seemed to work. Once again, you can see that smoke layer is starting to light off. And so we were trying to control our environment while apply water to try to stop the heat release rate. And unsuccessful, and so we needed to get out. So my department does not teach gas cooling for 20 weeks. We teach it for 3 days. but it's important. I'm a firm believer in education. So this is straight stream on the left. In our version of the T-cell, which we had to create as an L shape to fit around our training tower. And then they get some gas cooling for a couple days. As an educator, it's my responsibility to teach recruits what's in the textbook, what's in the national standards, what's in the state standards. I have all of those competing interests. But I'm also responsible for teaching them things that they need to know in the field that aren't in those things. And so I take that responsibility very seriously. It's not just about going to a fire, it's about surviving a career of fires that you can't anticipate. And do you have as much education to lean upon and draw upon in novel situations? And that's a hard thing. Right? It's really hard to balance all those priorities. There's our building save. That's the Home Depot. Were we successful? So no one got injured, no fatalities. Does this mean organizationally there's no need for further training, that what we've done for 20 weeks of academy is correct? Many would construe it that way. There's no need for change here. We had a positive outcome by these very crude metrics. Do we probably need a large volume prop in our organization? I would say yes, right? But you know who has a large volume prop? Your organization. And because of the kindness and generosity of your organization, I was able to study and learn and then transfer some of that knowledge to help people go home. As I said, this is the current court case, arrested just about a week later for lighting multiple fires allegedly so as to facilitate a theft. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Sorry, I probably went over my time, but if you have any questions, we may or may not have time for that.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.